This is Rob Tepper for Boxing Social. Delighted to be joined here today by Adam Smith. We're in the immediate aftermath of Sergio Garcia's unanimous decision victory over Ted Cheeseman. Adam, let's start at the top. What did you make of the main event?
I thought it was a terrific performance from Sergio Garcia. You know, he started so strongly at such a pace, but his accuracy in the first couple of rounds, I think, really shocked Ted Cheeseman, who, you know, was playing catch up from the word go, really. I mean, it was hard to give him a round in the first half of the fight, but maybe the eighth, you could be generous. He had a good sort of a good spell there, but you know, it was a wide decision. Can't believe one of the scorecards at 115 to 114. I think that's just bizarre. I thought Sergio Garcia was terrific, and you know, it was a risk. We all knew beforehand that Ted Cheeseman was going straight from British to European level, and that's what happens. Sometimes, you know, it is a case of levels, too much too soon. What you can't do is take anything away from Ted Cheeseman's heart, his spirit, his guts. Every second of that fight he wanted to win, and he tried to win, but he was shipping too many punches. You know, really, he was just trying at some point to break Garcia's will, and that will wasn't going to be broken. It was a wonderful performance by Sergio Garcia, his first fight away from Spain, and he deserves full credit. Back he goes with the European title.
Now, the fight that kept kind of cropping up in the build-up to this was Lewis Ritson-Patera. Do you think that more needs to be done, or we need to kind of reevaluate potentially the talent pool at British level? You've got guys like Lewis Ritson blowing through British level, you've got Ted Cheeseman who becomes British champion. Is being British champion just not enough anymore?
I think it just depends on the European level as well. You know, Lewis Ritson was blowing through everyone domestically, but Ted Cheeseman had just won the British title. You know, in hindsight, maybe he should have had, you know, 2 or 3 defences and then moved on. But Ritson did that. He blew everybody away. So I think that was a bit of a shock for Ritson because, you know, he started really well against Patera in that fight. It was different to this. This was much more one-sided from start to finish. You know, you've got to take the risk sometimes. I know Lewis Ritson can come back from that defeat. It wasn't too much of a punishing, damaging defeat, but Ted needs a bit of time off now. You know, he's 23, he'll come again, he'll be devastated with that, but you know, it was a hard fight there. I think Johnny and Dave were saying studio office, that's almost like 5 fights in one, and you know, look, he wanted to win it so much. Huge credit for the heroic guts that he showed in the fight, but you know, let's be honest, he lost virtually every round, and he was beaten by a European champion who most of us didn't know was as good as he was. So sometimes you got to roll the dice, and this one backfired.
Interview that I found myself a party to the other day, as did you at the press conference. Kind of indication that I got, and it's something that you said yourself, that this card potentially wasn't as strong as you would have liked it to be. Now the main event has kind of come unstuck. What do you make of the current state of British boxing on this kind of level? I mean, we've had in recent times, I mean, as recent as George Groves, we've had George Groves, David Hay, you know, former kind of stalwarts of the upper echelon of British boxing retire. Do you think enough attention has kind of been paid to the underneath that? Are we kind of seeing the focus on the upper echelons now come and, excuse my French, bite us in the arse?
Well, I told Eddie beforehand that, you know, I wanted Joshua Buatsi to headline tonight, but in hindsight, actually, it wasn't a bad card. It was full of action, it was full of drama. Craig Richards' win was stunning over Jake Ball, and you know, Lawrence Okoli got back up and running. Felix Cash made the sort of statement that we'd been waiting and hoping that he might do. So actually it was a good night here and a great atmosphere, and you know, and if you're a British fight fan, sometimes, you know, it's good that you just can't win them all. You know, ultimately the better fighter came and he won, and that's what happened with Sergio Garcia. I think, yeah, there is a gap. I mean, George Groves retires this week, David Hay and Tony Bellew gone. You know, the likes of your sort of Anthony Crollers and Ricky Burns are getting to the tail end of their careers, even Amir Khan and Kell Brook, and you do need new blood coming through. But you know, around ringside tonight you have the likes of Josh Kelly, Joshua Buatsi, Anthony Fowler, Joe Cordina, Conor Benn, so many ready to go in there. Martin J. Ward I saw as well. You know, and if you look at it, you had Felix Cash, Lawrence Okoli and Craig Richards shining tonight. You just didn't have Ted Cheeseman. So you know, you've got to probably ask whether it was the right step to take for Ted, but they took the risk, and sometimes in this business you have to. He'll be devastated by it. He'll be very disappointed. It's back to the drawing board. Tony Sims is a great trainer, and he'll do absolutely the best for him. He's 23, he'll come again, but he's got to learn, and he can't just fight with his face, which he did for most of the second half of the fight at least. And you know, tactics went out the window early. It was clever from Garcia, and you know, he gave us a terrific performance.
We had. I will come on to the wins for Okoli, for Felix Cash, etc. afterwards. But with those wins kind of coming at this level as they do progress. I mean, obviously Lawrence Okoli is somebody, for example, who is going to be crossing that British to world level divide sooner rather than later. Do you kind of need to look at bridging that gap? Is this another wake up call like the Patera fight was? Sam Eggington, Mohamed Mamoun, another fight. Do you kind of, not necessarily you, but certainly Eddie and by association yourself, kind of have to look at bridging that gap in in a better way, I think?
Yeah, look, I think sometimes, I said at the beginning of commentary tonight, you don't know what European champions are going to come over because sometimes you haven't seen much of them. You know, all his career, Sergio Garcia's, was in Spain. Obviously, Sergio Martinez saw something very early on that he liked about him. But, you know, I was talking to Dave Colwell beforehand and he said, you know, what he'd seen of Garcia was nothing and he expected Ted Cheeseman to walk through him and he couldn't believe it in the first few rounds. So sometimes you just don't know and fighters can get themselves up for certain events and also things turn quickly. As I said, Garcia had a brilliant start. You know, if Cheeseman had a bit of success first 2 or 3 rounds, maybe it was slightly different. But ultimately, it was levels tonight. The better guy won, and you know, you've just got to come again. But yeah, you know, you have to be sensible about your matchmaking. It's really down to the trainer and how quickly they want to push the button, because the promoter can give you the opportunities. There is pressure, of course, on headlining an event, but you've got to back it up. And maybe, you know, it's I mean, look, we're going on March the 23rd with a load of British title fights, you know, Lawrence Okoli and Whyte Camacho with Joshua Buatsi, Lewis Ritson, and then the world title with Charlie Edwards. But, you know, ultimately, if they can, the old-fashioned route was, you know, defend your British title a few times, then move on to European or grab a Commonwealth and then finally take the plunge into world if you're good enough at European level. So yeah, but you know, people want to be fast track now. Social media demands big fights and big opportunities, and that's what they're getting. And you know, ultimately, Ted Cheeseman wanted this as much as anybody. So he just found a painful lesson in the ring tonight, but he can come again. You know, he wants to fight. He wanted to win every second of that fight, and that's great to see. But I think he needs a long rest. And I think, yeah, it's a bit of a wake-up call.
Does that put pay to, obviously Anthony Fowler's got to box Scott Fitzgerald, would that put pay to any potential Fowler-Cheeseman fight in the near future?
Listen, I think Ted Cheeseman needs a rest. You know, he'll be devastated tonight. You know, he lives and breathes the sport just like Anthony Fowler does. And if Anthony Fowler had been in there and that had happened to him tonight, not saying that would, he might have boxed a very different fight. But, you know, it's so difficult. You lost for the first time. You've been built up over 3.5 years. You're 15-0. You think you're almost invincible. And then you get, you know, sort of taught a lesson. And it happened to Lewis Ritson in a roundabout way, Sam Eggington as well, but you still get big fights out of it. Ritson's back in a few weeks, you know, so is Sam against Liam Smith. They'll come again. Fighters are tough, made of tough stuff, and I think Ted Cheeseman proved tonight how tough he is. But no, I don't think we talk about Fowler or anyone at the moment. I think what we care about is Ted Cheeseman makes a good recovery from it. It was a hard night. He needs to take a long rest. He needs to have his family around him, and he'll come again. The trouble with Ted is he'll want to be back in the gym Monday morning and training. That's the problem, and that's where Tony Sims' experience will come in.
Just final word on tonight's card. Very, very impressive performance from Craig Richards, stopping Jake Paul in 3 rounds. I
think he stole the show. I mean, I said to Felix Cash after his win, oh, finally we've seen a real statement from you, and I was really impressed with that. You know, the manner of victory for Felix Cash tonight. But yes, Craig Richards stole the show for me. I thought he was punch perfect. I thought he was terrific the way he was cool, calm. He was accurate. He got his jab going. You know, he beat Paul to the jab, and he never let Jake Paul get settled. You know, he showed a fragility again, Jake, and you know, he's got to go back to the drawing board. That was a tough loss. Second time inside the schedule. But, you know, look, all fighters can come again, but for me, Craig Richards proved tonight. You know, a lot of people thought Ball would win that fight on talent and skill. And Craig Richards is a dark horse, and he's come through. He's a lovely guy. He took that opportunity against Frank Buglioni at short notice. He actually covered himself in glory that night, despite the defeat. And I think he'll have some big fights in the light heavyweight division now. Really interesting to see him in the likes of Anthony Yard and Jose Burton and Joshua Buatsi. I think Craig Richards deserves enormous credit for waiting for that fight for so long and then delivering the performance under pressure when it mattered.
Just final word, because they are literally dragging the arena around behind us. Dillian Whyte was ringside to watch Fabio Wardley, who himself deserves a mention. Good performance from him. Dillian Whyte basically said the Anthony Joshua fight's not going to happen. I imagine, well, maybe you can enlighten me, has much changed since I spoke to you yesterday at the weigh-in? Do we have any movement on the April the 20th date? He spoke about Dominic Brazil, Luis Ortiz is another name that's been mentioned.
it?
I think that's what I know. I mean, I think it's obvious that Jarrell Miller is the front runner by far now for AJ, possibly early June in New York. Dillion's said he's not going to fight Joshua for the money, so he's going to have to go again. He said tonight that he'll fight April the 20th. I think it's, as far as I know, it's Luis Ortiz, Alexander Povetkin, mentioned Alexander Usyk, but Dominic Breazeale is the one I think Dillian fancies. I mean, for me, I said to you yesterday, Alexander Povetkin I think will be the one for me. But listen, it's one of those, and I think April the 20th back here, I think the O2 is free, and I think it is likely to happen. Dillian Whyte against one of those big names in another big heavyweight showdown on the fight with plenty of heavyweights on the card. And I'd like to see Povetkin or Breazeale.
Does that put pay to Crawford-Khan being on Sky?
Don't know yet. We've got to wait and see. We've got to wait and see what happens. Obviously, we'd love to see Amir on Sky. I wanted to see him fight Kell Brook, or we'd be interested to see him fight Terence Crawford. But we have to wait and see how it all the pieces fall. But what I do know is that, and what Eddie's saying is that April 20th we'll be back here at the O2.
Okay, well, Adam, it was a pleasure catching up with you. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. Look forward to catching up with you soon.
Cheers, Rob.
Thanks, mate. Cheers, mate.